Welcome back to an episode of Who Saved Over My Podcast, the Spectator Mode version. I'm one of your co-hosts, Neil Strebig, of course, and with me, as always, is Donald Double D DeCray.
Hello.
So keep it short and simple. We're not going to go back over the intro to what Spectator Mode is. If you don't know, listen to last week's episode, the one before that. Don't want to keep repeating myself, folks.
Yeah, the goal is to be a little bit quick on this, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So today's topics, give you a quick rundown. We're going to talk about the Borderlands movie, pretty impressive cast. Legos kind of gave a big, no with Activision Blizzard with some Overwatch 2 tours and Lego sets coming out. We got some Battlefield news or lack of Battlefield news in a way.
Yeah.
Some other news with Riot and League of Legends and some online bullying. And kind of leads into the last topic as well with some bullying and G4 statements as well from some of the cast members at that TV network. So the last two topics we'll probably dive into a little bit longer than the first three. But I mean, let's get into it. You want to get it started, Double D?
Yeah, why not? So we'll start off with the Borderlands movie that's been announced. The cast has been released. It's got a couple big name stars, including Kate Blanchett as Lilith, Kevin Hart as Roland, Jack Black coming in as Claptrap, Jamie Lee Curtis as Dr. Patricia Tannis. And then we've got a bit of an ensemble cast with other people covering the other roles. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but Ariana Greenblatt, Florian Monteau, Haley Bennett, Janina Gavin Carr, Gina Gershon, Cheyenne Jackson, Charles Baba. Oh my! This is a tough one for me. Babalola.
Who
and
isn't in it?
A few more, but yeah, it's got an impressive cast. The question I think a lot of people have is, are they like, how well will these people represent their characters essentially on the big screen, right? Because, you know, like Jack Black, Kevin Hart especially have strong personalities. Jack Black as Claptrap, sure, I can see that. Kevin Hart as Roland, I don't know. I mean, the video game vibes is funny and stuff like that, but is this necessarily the right fit for the characters? What do you think?
No, I'm with you, especially Roland, a bit more serious character and whatnot too. But I mean, with that cast and no one, I think the comedic backgrounds of Borderlands, I think that's more the vein they're going with to make a fun, entertaining movie, probably R-rated, lots of violent. I mean, it should be R-rated, lots of violent, necessary bloodshed, over the topness. So with that in mind, I think the cast they're putting together kind of hits all of that. But I do think we're seeing this a lot with the video game movies, and we know the history of video game movies. Not many are actually good movies.
Yeah.
Anytime you take those properties, it's bad. But the casts are huge.
Oh yeah, and what's kind of like weird is we definitely have seen some good video game movies come out. You know, like Mad Max as a franchise has been, I think, solid all around, for example. And then you have like, I think like the World of Warcraft movie, which was so anticipated and largely not that well received, considering all the lore and stuff they had the potential. So I don't know. Like, I can't tell how much of this is just like a cash grab attempt. Like, hey, let's take a very well-known IP, stuff it with a bunch of well-known actors. I mean, you know, we've got some real big names in here. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And take our money and go, or how much of this is like a serious attempt at putting together a good cast to make a good movie. So, you know, I guess we will see.
Also, Mad Max, that wasn't a video game first.
Was it not?
No, that was this 80s cocaine-fueled dystopian, and that somebody basically
and then they made a video game.
It was just like, hey, Mel Gibson.
Oh, look at this. I'm getting called out on
Pontiac Firebird needs gasoline. They bumped an 8-ball, and then boom, that was made.
Well, then, I don't have a good example. Do you have a good example of a video game made movie? Because Resident Evil didn't really hack it. No.
Good video game. I mean, Ready Player One was a book, but it's built on video game culture quite a bit. I think they did a good job with that. I mean, I like the original Super Mario Brothers movie. I think it's a classic. I think it's probably should win every Oscar.
Somebody can like leave a comment or something about a movie based on a video game that was actually solid and a hit, because we're coming up short right now for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely not one that's coming to recent memory. I mean, Bleach and Cowboy Bebop, I think, were the first live action like anime shows and movies that
but
did
that's
themselves
not
justice.
That's definitely not. See, and we're getting off the flow, man. We said we were going to be snappy about this. So
this is true. It's true. Man.
Tell me what's going on with Lego.
That's a good question. I have no idea, but no. Legos had an actually Overwatch 2 Titan set coming out. It was announced in, I think, middle December and then got delayed. It was supposed to come out February 2nd. They pushed it back because, again, everybody knows Activision, Blizzard, huge misconduct as far as workplace, sexual misconduct, pretty much anything the HR says no to, they were doing. Legos decided to pull. They still have, I guess, Overwatch 1 and everything, before that, everything that's already been on the market. Overwatch has been out for almost 6 years now. But with Overwatch 2, they're pumping the brakes, kind of seeing where things go and let the dust settle. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe the theme for Spectator Mode today a little bit, is some of these gaming controversies and culture around the industry and stuff going on with that, because this definitely comes into some of the larger concerns with especially like women in the workplace and how they are treated. The CEO, Bobby Kotick, I'm not saying that right. One of those is right. One of those is not correct, obviously, of Activision Blizzard, is the one getting most of the heat for what's going on here. And like the stories come out, we hear things about different companies. I think it's one of those things. There's a preponderance of evidence at this point, right? Like to imagine that these are isolated cases, or these are stories taken out of context, or like, oh, it's just a few bad apples. I don't think that argument can be made in good faith anymore when we keep hearing this about a variety of companies. And then when you also hear about something like as large as Activision Blizzard, which is, I think, in some ways one of like the flagship developers in the industry, it brings up the question of like, if it's even going on there, what are the odds it's going on just all over, rampant in the industry and stuff, and similar to like the issues that we've been hearing about, like the Me Too movement in Hollywood and stuff. Like, it's an open secret maybe that this is what tech is like if you're a woman in these spaces.
No, I'm with you. It's interesting to me, at least with Legos, because we're reviewing their partnership, and we've definitely seen the windfall with companies and developers, and even Xbox talking about, do they need to make a statement? And I'm not defending Activision or anybody that was involved with this, but Americans do love scapegoats, and it's very clear Activision Blizzard is becoming a scapegoat for the misconduct. Has been pegged across the video game industry for quite some time. And I think companies like Lego and even developers like Xbox, PlayStation are, chalking up, running them over, backing them over them twice kind of thing. It doesn't lead them much to really, even if they repair the cultural damages, where does it lead them as a company with this kind of fallout?
Yeah.
And is that fair? I don't know.
Well, because I think part of the thing too is I feel like there's been a shift in priorities with gaming companies in general, away from like doing something they're necessarily passionate about to being just really capitalist and focused on making money and all the kind of crap that comes with that. So I'll actually use this as my segue to move into the Battlefield controversy. Battlefield 2042 released, receiving a lot of heat from gamers, especially on Reddit, to the point that there are articles on Kotaku, PC Gamer, IGN, all looking at specifically the subreddit for 2042 and what's going on there. Because, again, the game was changes in design, rushed, unfinished, pricing, the model they're using and stuff like that. Like, people are very unsatisfied with what's going on. And at the same time, while I definitely hear those concerns and feel them myself, this seems like what's become the norm for games in the 20th century. You know what I mean? Like, this is what it's like when games come out these days, is they're unfinished. They're day one patches. They have predatory monetization schemes. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like stuff's going downhill real fast.
No, I mean, and we're going to have a whole segment just kind of on this topic itself, because it's kind of like, who's at fault? Is it just the developers? Is it fans bashing games too soon when
and we talked about that, I think, in a previous podcast as well.
Yeah, and like some patches can be easy fixes to certain things that seem like major issues at launch, but with Battlefield, and I haven't played it and haven't really followed the series either, full disclosure kind of thing, but reading through the Reddit thread and the news you sent me, and we'll have links to all these stories too in the comments. I don't think I did the last one, but I think be helpful to follow on. But either way, with Battlefield, then it just is like, why'd you put it out? Everyone was kind of saying it's just a demo. It's clearly not a finished, polished game. It was supposed to be battle royale. That's pretty clear with the map size, but then all these pieces are missing. And I don't know what the answer is to that. And I can't fault fans for being upset about this either, because developers and publishers should know at that point, how close is this? And quite frankly, what's so wrong with rolling it back? We've seen good faith be rewarded by fans of like, okay, it took longer than we wanted, but if it's a complete game, no one's going to be mad. The anger and resentment comes from when it's a game that should have been a free demo.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that should be said too is there seems to be, I think, a disconnect between fan expectations and developer goals, essentially, in terms of what's being put out, how it's being put out. There, I think another example would be maybe Halo Infinite. There is this idea that they must include Battle Royale because this is like the current trend in games coming out. They didn't bother with that. Halo traditionally never had that. They're not suffering for that. Like Halo Infinite has its issues for sure, but it's not because they didn't implement a Battle Royale mode. That wasn't the issue. So sometimes with these games, I can't tell if there's a breakdown of communication between fans and developers of like, hey, this is what we're looking for, and the developers being able to provide that instead of what they think the fans want. Yeah. So I can't tell. But going back to, controversy after controversy, Riot Games is the publisher for the wildly popular MOBA League of Legends, is investigating the TSM CEO and co-founder. I'm going to say his name wrong. Andy Dinh. Dinh? Feel like that's right. I shouldn't be reading any names ever.
On the show all the time, so
yeah, I know. I should not read any names ever. I'm so self-conscious.
We don't have a team letting us know phoneticals now.
Yeah, so somebody
the phonetics of each word.
We really need to sit down and just write it out, like real simple. Like this is how you say it. But the short version is Andy Dinh has been accused of being a very toxic manager, accused by employees and former players, even that he's basically burned them out on the industry, the way he treated them, the way that he used them and discarded them. Being abusive, some stuff. There was, streams that came up, for example, with Marcus Dyrus Hill, who was a former top laner for Team Solo Mid, and how Andy Dinh was treating him on stream, talking to him and everything else, and the abusive nature of all that. And, this is Riot Games' baby. League of Legends is their thing. I think they're very involved for the most part. And so for them to get involved in investigating team owner, I think it's kind of an interesting step by itself.
Yeah, well, I think them getting involved is a money issue though as well, because their reputation is now involved, and this is one of the biggest North American teams as well. What struck me in this story, reading it, was Dinh's only 29, so he's pretty young. I mean, he's younger than me. Yep. Crazy, younger than you as well.
Yep,
because you're younger than me. But this is what stuck me. And like esports and video games, clearly we've talked about on the show already. We've talked about it, twice already just on this episode, has a problem with harassment and toxicity and basically just people being assholes. But he's been in a leadership position and in charge basically of this team since 2009.
Mm-hmm.
He's 29. So he was a goddamn teenager when he was leading one of the largest esports teams in North America. That inherently, in my opinion, is like, it's just fucking stupid.
That has a lot, I think, to do with the way League of Legends developed and grew, because Riot as a company basically said, we want to make this a thing. We want esports to be taken as seriously and be as big on the public stage as like more traditional sports and stuff like that. And so they've invested a lot of money into the esports arm of the organization. They typically lose money on that side of the organization. That's not where they generate money, but it's a commitment to them to grow that side of the business. And the beginning of League of Legends, it was very much like Wild Wild West in terms of anything went, with forming teams, forming organizations and stuff. They didn't have rules, and these days it's franchisees. You have owners of franchises, you buy those, like there's trading rules and stuff. Like everything's gotten significantly more structured, which is all, I think, good if their goal is to be taken more seriously. But then it brings into this issue, I think, of like, how do you censure franchise owners and stuff like that?
Yeah, and maybe we deserve another episode 2 to this topic as well. I love that Spectator Mode becomes like basically, the minor leagues for our idea, story ideas, or episode ideas. But and I mean, I covered this a bit with some of my esports coverage when I was with York Daily Record. Is Harrisburg and the culture and, the structure, as you put it. But I think Riot's kind of covering the bases then as well, because you bet on basically the cultural horse. But my point is the kid was, 19 or younger than that, 16, 17, basically, when he got involved. And then you grandfathered in bad habits. We see it in hospitality industry all the time, to where people come in at a young age. They don't necessarily, they learn bad habits. It's not an excuse for behaving poorly or badly, but it now becomes on the person to basically hold themselves up to a standard that has been non-existent, and for them to educate themselves as far as what should and shouldn't be. So if the kid was an asshole at 16, he has a position in power now. You're only enabling him to be more of an asshole at 29.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. Because I think one of the concerns, a larger concern, might be esports in general. I think a lot of the players and what we would call stars legitimately are younger. You know what I mean? We are talking about teenagers a lot of times, and it's the same issues that come with fame, child stars and movies and stuff like that. Like, it puts you in a bad situation because you got a lot of money with not a lot of responsibility per se up until that point. Maturity is still something being figured out. I think most people have made some mistakes in their teen years and early 20s probably that they regret these days looking back. Grew a lot as people and learned from that. But you put it in a bubble and surround it with a lot of money, you don't necessarily suffer the full consequence of those actions. I don't know if you grow as much as a person, which might lead to some of the issues that we're seeing in this specific case, and maybe around the industry in general, as like these younger people grow up and then look for other careers and other positions in the gaming industry after they stop being players, or they grow up playing a bunch of games and they want to get into that because that's where their passions lie, and these are role models. These are people in positions of power and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely a larger conversation to be had here. And I'm also thinking of like Tyler T1 as another streamer famously banned for being toxic, brought back, reformed. I think we mentioned him before in a previous discussion as well. I think a lot of his stuff now is a character, but my concern that I mentioned previously was like how many of his viewers know that this is like a persona that he's putting on for the camera. You know what I mean? Because he still gets all huffy puffy, and you know what I mean? And kind of like does that like ragey stuff that like maybe it's good viewership, but are people looking at him as a role model and taking him seriously? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something we got to spend more time on. But in terms of being an asshole or bad behavior, one of G4's hosts, and for y'all that don't know, G4 gaming channel got brought back to life end of last year. Was huge hit, when we were younger, when we were teenagers, and it was basically the only outlet for gaming. The relaunch isn't just focused on gaming; it's still pop culture, but they've added more, D&D, a lot more anime talk than the previous installation. But this specific news bit, one of their hosts, Indiana Froskurinn, I'm probably going to mispronounce that. So Indiana Froskurinn, Black, basically called out viewers that have been sexist on the channel. Specifically, they do the live show on their Twitch stream, and then if you watch on the actual station, you see the edited and cut version. Often on the Twitch stream, this is when I called it, and it's on their Twitter feed as well. They'll see the comments from the YouTube and the Twitch streams and people in Discord commenting. And oftentimes, basically, the biggest thing against Frosk is she's not as sexy as Olivia Munn, who was the original host. And people openly bash her about this and basically attack her, saying how she's not pretty. But it's just ridiculous. Like, you wouldn't walk down the street and say this to somebody. You probably should be a bit ashamed if you even thought it in your head, say, with some of the comments they've received. And it's not just her, it's most of the female cast that on there as well. They've openly attacked as far as their looks or just their opinions about their style. And it's just completely unnecessary and personal attacks. But she took about 5-10 minute segment and a statement to just, blast them and, bury them and be like, stop acting like this. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is kind of a tough one because there's a lot of thoughts I have on this, and I'll try to summarize them as well as I can to keep things short, because that's the point of this, is to be a little bit quick in our takes on this. But like we said, this whole issue is a larger issue at play in the industry. The first thing that comes to mind is I don't actually know who is making these comments. Like, I get that these are coming from like internet and Twitter and stuff and Twitch and stuff like that, but like, are these 34-year-old men? Or are these 16-year-old teenage boys? Because there's a big difference, I think, in the standard you hold those groups to when they're making these comments. And like, in some sense, not that it's ever okay, but if it's a 34-year-old man, I understand just being like, screw you, fuck off. If it's a 16-year-old kid, then I want to have more of a dialogue of like, hey, like, you know, there's still hope for that person, essentially, of like, we can have this dialogue, we can talk about these views and where it's coming from. You know, the second thing that comes to my mind too is I can't tell necessarily if these are, and like this might be my own uninformedness on the topic, like some of these are definitely just purely sexist, but I can't tell if some of it's just because they know it gets a rise out of her. You know what I mean?
Could be.
Like I kind of think some of the like when you think about like toxic comments made to like guys and stuff like, oh, you're a fag, or like, oh, your mom's a whore and stuff like that, like it's, you know, it's not like it's good stuff to say, you know what I mean? I'm not supporting the that at all, but it's also not really coming from, I don't think, a place of like deep-seated belief in those things as much as it like, I'm trying to find your trigger words or your trigger buttons. I'm trying to find the things that will upset you, you know? And I think in this case, my fear is like, she's shown this bothers her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it a problem? Yes. Is it something that needs to be addressed? Yes. Is G4 the publication to address it? I'm not convinced. And if the motivation is for them to get a rise out of her or make her feel bad, she's giving it to them. You know what I mean? Like she's proven that they're getting to her.
No, and that's a great point. And you know, is it the right medium to make a statement like that? To me, to your point on this, and a portion of it when I did see it too was, you know, in journalism, when you become the story, you failed, and you probably should, you know, pull back and reevaluate. And she's made herself the story with this. And part of that is, yes, you want to take a stance. You don't want people to do this. I don't know, the G forecasting is very close knit. They're all very supportive on Twitter with one another, sharing and supporting each other. So, you know, it's not just her getting it either. You know, it's Gina Darling, Olivia May, and Nova. What's the I forget the other the female caster or host. They all have been getting it nonstop compared to the male colleagues as well. So it probably is a distraction. They felt the need to do it. The way she presented it definitely came off as, you know, she's gone on her own, being personal, and maybe it was, you know, she felt the need to do that, and, you know, God bless her for doing so. But to your point then too, you now also give them ammunition because now you put the spotlight and now they know they bother you. And usually the best way to handle trolls is by just letting them fucking talk themselves silly and then until they're out of breath, you know, and you just let them piss off.
Yeah, and just go on being excellent. Because like, I don't know, because it raises kind of the alternate point, which is when and or how is it appropriate to address these issues, right? Because I think neither of us are really defending the behavior. I'm mostly arguing that, like, you know, the way I address it with, again, like a 34-year-old man and a 16-year-old kid is going to be a different approach, right? Because there are very different circumstances depending on who's saying it. But I don't want it to seem like I'm advocating that you never address these issues, that they never get talked about. I'm just not convinced that this was maybe the way to go about it. Like, maybe rather than her making a speech on her own and stuff and getting involved directly, G4 as an organization could have addressed this in a more general sense or something like that. But I don't
directly
know.
And have a segment dedicated to that rather than taking away from an episode of X-Play.
Perhaps, right? And like do something like a special on this topic or something like that to draw attention to it. Maybe bring in more of the male co-hosts and stuff like that to add balance to it, so it doesn't seem like this is like her just flipping off, because I guarantee the people that she's speaking to are the same people that will say, one, be excited that she got upset, and two, because it's just her popping off, it's going to be about her. You know what I mean? It's not really going to be looking at the larger issues that she's bringing up. So I feel bad for her. I really do. I just don't know that this was the right play in this circumstance to like, the right response, I should say. Not really the right play, but the right response to what was going on.
No, I hear you there. And again, I think it's another topic too. We can definitely pull the layers back on and, you know, discuss more in another episode as well. But that's all we got for today's Spectator Mode. We're going to have a couple more episodes coming your way. As always, this is a weekly segment. As far as upcoming regular Who Saved Over My Podcast episodes, I think the next topic we're going to discuss another anime. No, My Hero.
Yep, we're doing
is that
My
the
Hero's the next one.
Is that the rumor?
That is the rumor currently, because I think it's the only show that we're both at the same place on.
Yeah. Well, you love binging stuff, so you're always way behind.
Yeah, but, well, because I always wait for. I just rather. I rather if someone was like, "Would you watch a 10-hour movie?" I'd be like, "No." But if they were like, "Would you watch 10 one-hour episodes?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, sign me up." And that's how I watch all my media.
Ridiculous. But guys, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. As mentioned, I'll drop a couple of links to some of these stories in the YouTube comments as well for y'all that listen audio wise. Use your phone, look it up after the episode. But as always, guys, thank you for listening. Always appreciate it. And until next time.
A good one.